Hey, it's Sarah back on the Kaleidoscope on Relax Radio, and we're back again to talk about is work from home the path to the future. Now, a very good morning to you if you're just tuning in. We're here to talk about the future because we're in the future now. The pandemic is our future. Now, it's obviously not as scary as that. I mean, it's not as bad. It, as what I'm saying, it's definitely not going to be like that. But don't worry, we'll be talking about it. And if you're just tuning in, I'm Sarah, and I'm here to keep you company for this hour as well. And we'll be talking about the pandemic and working from home. Now, I'm super excited to be here. And if you have any questions, if you have any opinions, if you have any thoughts that you would like to share, then you can do that you can do that actually on by texting us on 078 Now, super excited to be here and talk to you about the pandemic and the path to the future because we've been stuck in this pandemic for so long. Um, it's almost beginning to look like we've been stuck in this pandemic forever. And it makes a lot of sense because we've been stuck in this for almost 2 years, if you think about it. And back when it was 2019 June, you didn't think that by 2021 June, we would be in the middle of a pandemic. That was the last thing on your mind, right? And that's why it's so important for you to adjust to this new setting. It's important for you to adjust to what the future might hold and brace yourselves to embrace it, if I may. So is work from home the path to the future is what we will be discussing, because it currently looks like it might be the path to the future. So obviously, because of the pandemic, work from home has become the new normal. It's so normalized, everyone does it. And I mean, we don't really have another choice. You don't have a choice other than working from home, especially because you're not allowed to go out because it's lockdown. So your only choice then is to work from home. So the thing is, when you're working from home, you're very comfortable. It's less stress. You can focus better. And it has honestly made life so much easier for a lot of us. And you agree to that because you don't have to wake up so early in the morning, think about travel, think about, food, and think about all the money you have to spend just to go to work and do your job, right? So if you actually think about it, working from home has actually really really helped a lot of us. It has made life so much more comfortable, it has made life so much more easier, and it has made it really convenient. Okay, so that brings us to the question of whether working from home is actually the future. So a study that was done recently actually showed that about 24% of bosses actually support permanently working from home. Now that's great news, although the statistic is, not that high. That's actually obviously some good news, right? And it's good news because if so many bosses support working from home, then that means in the future there might be a possibility that your job could be entirely from home. You could just work entirely from home. You wouldn't have to come to office unless, it was a brainstorming session, or if it was something that was or unless it was an important meeting. And that's pretty good because that means we're now moving to the future. We're moving to this future where we don't have to constantly go to work constantly and always be at office, spend long hours at office. We can just do it from home, do our tasks, and then we can balance our lives better, right? And it also showed, so that study also showed that 36% of workers or employees actually wanted to work from home for most of their week. And that's obviously normal, right? Because you're in your comfort zone, you can do your work comfortably, you can relax, you can focus better. It helps increase your productivity when you're working from home. So it only makes sense that almost a little bit more than a third of the population, working population, actually wants to stay at home and work. And obviously, when we're talking about the working population, it's not like everyone has a vehicle, right? A lot of us use public transport, a lot of us commute our way to work, and a lot of us have other expenses as well. So working from home means that all those costs are cut down. So it sounds a little bit like we are already in the future. And a study that was done by the government actually showed that businesses had a great amount of uncertainty about moving forward. So even though there is a lot of people wanting to work from home, even though 24% bosses actually support permanently working from home, there was a lot of uncertainty for all these businesses that were actually operating and in terms of their future, because they weren't exactly sure about how their businesses would be when moving forward. Because to be honest, that's a fair reason. There's a fair reason for them to be uncertain, right? And with these statistics that I just said, it basically shows how working from home would look like in the future. But there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to it, because we're still stuck in the pandemic, right? And we're not even too sure about COVID. We're not too sure if we can completely get rid of COVID, or whether it's something seasonal, whether it'll come every season and we'll have to deal with it every season. If that's the case, that means we'll have to eventually adjust to life and get back with our lives, get back to how we normally did. Because if COVID is going to be seasonal, then chances are we probably can't always be going into a lockdown. We can't always be having curfew, because after a while it just doesn't make sense, right? Because you can do all of these things, but also when you're thinking about the health of your population, when you're thinking about the safety of your population, um you can do these things for a while, but you can't keep doing it forever, right? So there's obviously a lot of uncertainty, obviously, about COVID, and whether it'll return, whether we can completely get rid of it, right? Even though we know that the vaccination drive is currently happening, there was the National Health Service actually said that they do see a drop in the amount of vaccinations that they can currently give, right? So that means that we're not too sure about how the vaccination drive is actually happening as well. I mean, obviously, it's happening. It hasn't stopped, but the rate at which it is going, and the rate at which we have to, deal with the pandemic, right? And because there's a lot of uncertainty with it, we have to sort of start figuring out what we need to do for our businesses as well. And that is talking about working from home. Is that the right way to go? What kind of changes we need? What kind of investments we need to make if this is what our future is going to be like? So obviously the measures that we're currently taking right now, like working from home, having extra safety precautions like wearing our masks and maintaining social distance, those things will still obviously have to be maintained if COVID is going to be a seasonal thing. So that is why we really need to ponder upon this and think of whether working from home is actually the path to the future. Right now, if you're just joining in, good morning. I'm Sarah, and we're talking about working from home and whether it is the path to the future. Okay, and if you have any opinions, questions, thoughts that you would like to share, you can text me on 07852473473, and I would love to get your opinions across and have a little conversation about this situation, right? And I would also love if you could text me and tell me if there are any things that you want me to discuss in addition to what I'm currently discussing, so we can have a better conversation and we can share everyone's opinions on this show as well, right? But let's get into it, because we're now talking about if working from home is the way to go for the future, right? Now, there are obviously advantages and disadvantages of this whole thing, because it's completely new. It's not completely new. People have been doing it, but it's very new to a lot of people who are so used to going to work all the time. It's very new to them, right? So we're kind of talking about those people, we're talking about these changes, and with its advantages. Okay, so we'll talk about those advantages right now. So obviously, one thing that obviously comes to mind is how there's going to be a better work life balance. And that's very important, because it's very hard to balance both your work and your life when you're working, and when you're constantly at work. Like I was mentioning earlier, if you're a part of this hustle culture, if you're a big believer in working extra hours, if you're a big believer in working long hours, it's very hard for you to balance your life, your personal life, and your work life. But with working from home, you can find that you can find that there is a better balance between your work life and your personal life. And that's partially because you're spending a lot of time at home, right? You're doing your work, your office work at home. And that means that now, while you're doing your office work at home, you can also focus on other things, right? Because obviously, when you're working from home, you have more free time than you did. And I'm not saying unnecessary breaks. I'm saying that once you're done with your your task or whatever it is that you have to do, you actually have a little bit of time left that you can look into other things, right? Sometimes you can do a simple house chore like sweeping or cleaning or even dusting, right? Or you could, even cook a meal. Finally, I finally have some time to cook a meal, because we're so used to buying our food from out. We're so used to, getting it delivered. We don't really have, because we don't really have time to do any of these things. And it only makes sense that working from home has helped people find this balance, because you're spending more time at home, you have a little bit more free time than you used to, and you can focus on different things better, right? And that's why working from home, and that's why that is one huge advantage of working from home, right? So just to sum that up, it's better if people can actually have this perfect balance, not perfect, but better balance between working and their personal lives, because they're now at home, and it helps you do a lot of other chores as well, maybe even household chores, maybe even cooking yourself something you've wanted to eat for a long time. So those things really help. But stay tuned, because it's time to head into a small break, but I'll be back to talk about whether working from home is actually the future, and whether that is something that we should seriously start considering.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, and mainly one, because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
Hey, it's Sarah back on the Kaleidoscope, and we're talking about if working from home is actually the path to the future. And earlier we were talking about the advantages of working from home, and obviously one of them was how there's a better balance between your work life and your personal life, and how working from home has actually helped that. Okay, but obviously another advantage that is there from working that is there in working from home is actually that we're saving a lot of time. Okay, and what I mean is, a lot of us use public transport to travel to work, okay? And we're using a lot of money. We're also wasting a lot of time to go to work. And what I mean by this is, for you to use the train, you have to wake up at a certain time. You have to get dressed at a certain time, because it takes a certain time for you to go from your house to your workplace in the train, especially because there's also so many stops, so many people are there. So because of all those not obstacles, if I may, but they're not necessarily obstacles. So because of all of those things, it obviously takes a while to actually go to work. And that means that we have to wake up early to do whatever little house chores that we have to do, and then we have to get dressed and go to work, and we have to look after our children. And especially if you have a family, you're married, you have kids, or you just got married. There are so many things that we need to do before we leave the house. And I'm not just talking about like us, but I'm talking about everyone in general. There are so many things that you need to do before you leave the house. Sometimes it's something like uh, sometimes it's little things. Sometimes it's things like making yourself some coffee, or packing some food. So many different things that we need to do before we leave the house. And if you have kids, it's things like making their breakfast, dropping them off to school, making sure they're doing their online lessons and that kind of thing. So obviously, because of that, some of us have to wake really early because we have to do all these little things. And when now, because we're working from home, we don't actually have to wake up early. We actually have a lot more time on our hands, and we can work so much better because we have extra time. We're not spending an hour and a half just to travel back and forth from work to home, or from home to work. So those things really help. Now, another thing, or rather another advantage that is there from working at home, is actually it saves a lot of money. Now, if you actually logically think about it, this whole time you've been stuck at home, you haven't had to spend money on gas, or you haven't had to spend money on your car maintenance, or even buying yourself lunch while you're at office. Things like transportation, buying yourself food, maintenance, things like that. We've cut down a lot of those costs, especially because we don't travel to work anymore. It's so easy, staying at home and working, because it saves a lot of money as well. Now, that makes a lot of sense as to why people are opting to work from home rather than actually go to work, and why 36% of employees actually want to work at home for most of the day. Because if it's saving you so much of money, then it's something really good. And saving is something we're all struggling with, right? And we're struggling with saving, especially because of all the expenses that we need. And like I told you yesterday, it's really expensive to be alive. It's not easy being alive, because everything is expensive. Everything is, there are so many needs and wants that you have. There's so many things you have to spend money for. It's very hard sometimes to save money. So this is actually, helping people save money, and that is why people want to do this more often. Now, another thing that's there is obviously a positive environmental impact. Now, research found that when people were working from home, that if they had gone to work, they would have had actually wasted and polluted the environment a lot. So there's a positive environmental impact, because research found that 3 million tons of greenhouse gases were actually avoided when people worked from home, and oil savings actually managed to reach 980 million. And that is a lot of money. And another thing is, another important thing is, there's a lot of climate change right now. A lot of young people have taken up, have shown solidarity with these causes for climate change, talking about the environment, talking about sustainable futures, talking about green energy. And that's very important, because at the end of the day, it's our future. We are the youth. We need to make sure that we protect our environment, right? So obviously this is actually making a positive environmental impact, because it's helping a lot of it's helping all these emissions, it's helping all this pollution. And that means that it's actually really helpful, because we're managing to actually help the planet a lot as well. And that's something that a lot of us are happy about, because it's tiring to wake up every day to, make yourself a cup of coffee, get a quick breakfast, then get dressed, look after your, take care of your kids before you drop them off to work, and then head to work. And then also, at the back of your mind have the fact that, oh, I'm polluting the environment. Sometimes the things we do are so unhealthy, and it's a lot of worry, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of things to actually think about. If you think about it, being a human actually is really hard, because you're so many things to worry about. This environment, whether we're protecting it, whether we will have a planet to live on, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. There are so many things that that you have to think about when you're alive. So that's why working from home is actually a better alternative, because it has a very positive impact on the environment. And another thing is, obviously, it increased productivity and performance, and that's very important, because earlier we were talking about hustle culture, and we were talking about increasing productivity. So when you're at home and you have that really good balance between your life and your work life and your personal life, it helps, because now you will be more productive and you will perform better. Because when you finally find that balance, when everything in your life is actually going well, that things are finally beginning to work out, things are finally looking good, it actually helps your mental status a lot, because that is not something you have to worry about now, because everything's on the right path, everything's how it's supposed to be. So it's very, very important for you to actually make sure that that it's very important, or rather it's very advantageous, that working from home is actually helping a lot of people out there. It's helping them focus better, it's helping them have increased productivity and performance, and it's also saving the environment. So actually, if you think about it, it's a pretty good deal. um, you're helping yourself, you're helping the environment, you can spend time with the people you care about. So it sounds like a pretty good thing. But the thing is, while there are many advantages of working from home, there's also an equal amount of disadvantages as well. As much as there's advantages, everything has disadvantages. Like I say, there's always pros and cons of something. If there's good, there's bad. It's balanced. That's how the world works, that's how we all work. So like I said, there are disadvantages as well of working from home, and let's get into it. So one of the biggest issues that out there when you're working from home is there's a lack of community and teamwork, especially if you're an office that thrives on teamwork, if you are a company that is very that has a close sense of community, that there's a lot of work as a community, there's a lot of work as a team. It's going to get really hard, for you know you to do those. It's going to get really hard for you to do your job, right? And the thing is, it's not something that's unfixable. So the fact that there's a lack of community and teamwork is something that can actually be fixed, right? Because there are different ways in which you can fix that, especially because there's also so many different options or different ways in which you can fix a lot of these problems that we're currently facing because of working from home. It's just a matter of investing and finding the correct infrastructure to actually make it better. So a lot of these things are actually very, very yeah, they're very manageable. You can adjust it and make it work according to how you want it to. Now, another thing that is there when you're working from home is health risks, okay? And this is because obviously you have to spend a really long time in front of a computer screen, and after a while it really hurts your eyes, it affects your posture, it it has a lot of impacts, right? And what I mean by this is when you're constantly staring at a computer screen, when there's so much of brightness, when there's blue light from, the computer screen, when there's blue light from your phone, and especially because we live in this digital age where we're constantly, looking at our devices, we're constantly, on the laptop or on the phone. There's obviously a lot of risks when it comes to our eyes. It's not good for our eyes because we're constantly staring at this computer screen for such a long time. And mind you, it's not even like a dull computer screen. If you're like my brother, he loves having his brightness on 100, but if you're like me, you'll probably have your brightness on 20%. That is how bright my computer screen is, because I find it very hard for my eyes, especially given the fact that I'm already a bit blind. It's actually very hard for my eyes when there is a lot of light on my computer screen. And there's quite a huge population wearing glasses that have a lot of eye issues, and that obviously it's a huge disadvantage when it comes to the health risks that we have to face. Now, in addition to your eyes, there's also other things like your posture or your wrists. Now, when you're constantly on a computer and you're typing and you're using your hands, to move the mouse, to type, your wrists and your hands are always in they're always working, and sometimes you can overwork it and you can end up having a lot of pains and aches, and your muscles getting moving around. Not that it moves around, but you know what I mean. That your muscles can have a lot of effect because of it, because sometimes you can be overworking your wrist muscles or your hand muscles because you're constantly on the computer, you're constantly working, right? And in addition to just your wrists and your hands, also your posture. When you're in front of a computer screen, you're constantly staring, you're not exactly in a straight posture because your eyes are focused on the screen. So there is a lot of issues when it comes to your posture as well. So it's important to keep those things in mind also when you're working from home. So it's always good. So there's issues that we have with postures, that things like that can be adjusted, right? It's okay, it's completely fine for you to get up for 2 minutes, walk around your table, walk around your chair, move a bit, stretch your legs, things like that. We do it all the time. So something like that, doing things like that can definitely help you with all these health risks, and it can definitely help you when you're trying to focus on on your job, and when you're trying to focus on what you're doing. And when you're working from home, it's always good to do these things. Okay, but stay tuned, because we'll be back to talk about more disadvantages and if it is indeed the future from working at home. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But right now, let's get into a little break
again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about how the generation gap, how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no, if that makes sense.
They can't accept rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you, how did I do? Or you didn't do very well, and they get upset, And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young. Well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, I'd say to me, "You had one to forget." That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, "You had one to forget. Get over it." And that was it. So I'd dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, "You've had one to forget," God, there'd be an inquest. Me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. I've just, or daughter, I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much a lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
Hey, it's Sarah, and if you're just joining in, it is Relax Radio, and you're on the Kaleidoscope, and we're talking about working from home, and if working from home is actually the path to the future. Now, if you're just tuning in, a very good morning. I'm talking about the disadvantages of working from home, and that's what we were talking about a while back as well. And if you have any messages, or if there are any opinions, questions, thoughts that you would like to share with us, that you would like to tell me, text me on 07852 473 473, and you can get in touch with me and we can have a little chat. And if there's anything else that you want me to talk about in addition to working from home, and in addition to what I'm currently talking, you can do that as well. Just text me on the number that I just mentioned, 07852 473 473. So I was talking about health risks, and the health risks that you have to face when you are working from home, right? But I also said that some of those things, it's very manageable. You can avoid it. You just need to do a few exercises while you're working, or just take 2 minutes, walk around, stretch your legs, stretch your hands, and you'll be fine. Okay. So another huge disadvantage of working from home is communication. Now, I know we're in a digitalized age, and I know that communication shouldn't even be a problem, but the thing is, it is, because not um everyone responds to their phones, or responds to your questions right away. And what I mean by this is, when you're at office, you can just tap the person next to you and ask them that question you want to ask them. But when you're working from home, you need to text them, or you need to call them, and sometimes even when you do text them and call them, they don't really pick up. So you're really, that brings you in this hard position, because you don't know what to do. And it's really hard. It's really hard because you can't communicate with them, but you need to get your job done as well. So obviously there is the not lack of communication, but there is a difficulty in communication. And sometimes the things that you say, the things that you want to communicate, can be misinterpreted, because obviously communicating with someone in real life versus communicating with them through virtual platforms are actually really different. And we always have that age-old fight of who has the worst internet connection. That problem exists as well. So obviously, a little bit of a difficulty when it comes to communication, that is there when you're working from home. And another thing is, I know this sounds really controversial, but there's also a difficulty to balance your life. Now, I know I said earlier that you can find a better balance between your work life and your personal life, but if you actually think about it, there are two sides to that story as well. Sometimes you can find it better, sometimes you might be able to balance it better, but sometimes that might not be the case as well. Especially if you have kids, you have pets, then you know that they're going to start shouting, they're going to start yelling. They want, because they're children and they're pets, and they need a lot of attention, and we need to constantly keep an eye on them, right? It's very important to always keep an eye on them. So then things do get a little bit hard, because you have to make sure that your kids and your pets are safe. They're looking after themselves, and I'm talking about, not the pets. Obviously, the pets can look after themselves. But what I'm telling is that they're safe, and that they're not getting into any immediate harm. So obviously, there is a little bit of a difficulty when it comes to balancing your work life and your home life, because kids are really distracting. And I told that earlier as well, because the research found that one of the main reasons people found it a little bit difficult to work from home is actually because of children, because you can't focus on your work when you have a toddler running around. So there's obviously that as well, and that is something that is a little bit hard, but that is what it is. Now, another thing is there sometimes might be a lack of office equipment. And what I mean by this is, because for example, if you work in a highly specialized field, like technology, or even an IT related field, whatever it is, to do some of the jobs that you have to do, they have specialized equipment. But when you're working from home, those things aren't readily accessible. You can't It's not really available to you because you're working from home. So those things, sometimes it gets a bit hard when you're working from home, when you need those special equipment. And also, thinking of other things, like even if it's something simple, like your Wi-Fi, or if it's something as simple as your Wi-Fi. Not everyone has really fast Wi-Fi. Not everyone can has a fax and a printer at home. So obviously, it's sometimes it's hard when you don't have the same equipment you have in your office at home. But it can be a huge disadvantage when you're working from home and you don't have those specialized equipment. However, having said that, a lot of other companies like Twitter, or even Facebook, they actually have employees working from home, right? So then it's not that it's impossible. It's just that there is a whole process, and there's a lot of investment that needs to be done in terms of you know um being able to work from home and being able to do their job right. So what I mean by this is, obviously, if you are, if you work in Twitter, or if you work in Facebook, and they can actually afford, or if they have found a way to make sure their employees can work from home, then that means it's not impossible. It might be a bit costly, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. However, having said that, there's also a few positive, or rather advantages when it comes to workplaces. When y'all are working from home, or when we are working from home, there's advantages for companies as well. And what I mean when I say that is, when we're going to work, and when we're at work, we constantly use electricity, we use water, we use a whole lot of other things, because that's what humans do. We use a lot of things. So you can actually cut down on those costs when people are working from home, when they only come to office for a certain amount of days, or when they only come to office for a certain reason, say a brainstorming session or whatnot. It's actually quite easy for people to actually it's or rather it's actually quite easy for businesses to it's easy for businesses to save on their costs, right? And it helps them save on this cost. And especially because we are all, going through a tough time, we all have to make a lot of changes around our companies. We have to, try to cut down the costs as much as possible. Working from home actually seems like a really, really good it seems like a really good answer, or an alternative to actually come to work in the middle of a pandemic, right? And also, it kind of goes to show that the company cares about their workforce. The company cares about their safety and their health. But obviously, with the lockdown and all, um it's good to know that your company cares about you, that your company cares about your health and your well-being, and wants to make sure that you're okay in the middle of a pandemic, and you're looked after by the company. So obviously, in terms of things like that, it's very, very good for your if it looks good on your company as well. Now, obviously, like I said earlier, these things have actually, both the good and the bad. But the thing is, one cannot exist without the other, right? They coexist. But um it looks like it might be the path to the future, especially if you're, working from home, and you have to make all these changes, because we're not really sure, like I said earlier, we're not really sure if COVID can be completely stopped, if we can get completely rid of it, or if it's just something seasonal, right? So obviously, if that's the case, then it's good to know that your company can assist you, or that your company is bordering rather, on, working from home, wants to work from home, and wants to make sure that the employees have the best of everything, if I may. Yes. So that's a kind of good outlook for your company as well, but it's also, really good for all the people who work in your company as well. So if you're just tuning in, we're talking about, if working from home is a path to the future, and I was just talking about the disadvantages of working from home, but I was also talking about the advantages in terms of the company when their employees are working from home. Now, obviously, when it comes to, getting work done and other things done, it can be a bit of a hassle. It can be a bit, inconvenient, because of all the issues that are there, especially, in terms of internet, in terms of connecting, in terms of getting work done, in terms of productivity. But the thing is, those are not it's not something that can't be changed. Those are changeable things that we can all change, and we can work on, and try to, essentially make the situation much better, because, we might have to keep doing this for a while, um, because the pandemic looks like it has no end, and we'll be in lockdown for a while. So it's always better to brace yourselves to be ready to do this. And earlier also, we were talking about the advantages of working from home, what you can do to work from home. And if you're just tuning in, that was what we just discussed a little while back. Now it's almost we'll be moving on to other topics as well, but until then, we will be discussing this topic as well. So obviously, then we come to that question of, is working from home the path to the future? And I think it's actually a bit of both. But before I get into that, I actually want to head into a little break, because I have to save the best for the last. Okay, so let's get into that little break and quickly head back in and talk about this. Hey, if you're just tuning in, a very good morning. You're with me, Sarah, and we're talking about if working from home is actually the path to the future. Because, like I said earlier, if you weren't here earlier, what I was telling them was that it looks like the pandemic is quite indefinite. It means that we have to adjust our lives and make changes around it. So, we were just discussing about if working from home is actually the path to the future and how it's going to. How we'll have to adjust our lives, and we were also talking about the advantages and the disadvantages of working from home. So obviously, that is what we were talking about, and you're with me, Sarah, on the Kaleidoscope. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any opinions that you want to share with us, just text us on 07852473473, and we can have a discussion about it, right? And in addition to that, if you also want me to talk about something else, something new that you want to know, that you want to talk about, you want me to have a conversation, just text me and I will have a conversation on it, and I will share your opinions and thoughts as well. But getting back to this question of, is working from home the path to the future? Well, the answer is, well, I think so, because it looks like the path to the future is actually both working from home and working at your office as well. So, according to an estimation, by 2025, an estimated 70% of the workforce will actually be working from home for at least 5 days of a month. And I know 5 days sounds like a lot from all the days you have to go to work, right? But the thing doesn't sound like a lot. But the thing is, it's actually beginning to look like people will have the option from working from home as well. Now, obviously, from the time gap between last year to this year, uh, the advertisements that were placed for remote jobs, or jobs that were based on working from home, have actually doubled, which means that there is a high rise in jobs where you're required to work from home, especially because of the pandemic, which means that you have to make these changes. You have to make sure that um, you have to adjust to these changes and make sure that you're adjusting to them as well, right? So obviously, it looks like right now people are actually adjusting well to these changes. And if it, and because it looks like so many people are actually quite comfortable with the idea of working from home, and even 24% of bosses actually support working from home permanently, it will really, really help um, a lot of us out there who's actually trying to make sure that um we're trying to make our best out of this situation, right? So like I said earlier, it looks like it might be the path to the future, because in the future we will definitely have a little bit of working from home. And that is because like I said earlier, that we're not too sure about the pandemic. We're not sure where it's headed. We don't know what kind of path it will take, and we don't know the outcome of it properly as yet. So because of that, because all those things are so uncertain right now, because we have so many questions about those things, it's quite obvious that we'll have to continue taking some of these steps even in the future. So like I said earlier, the work like I said earlier, working from home is actually both, whether it's actually the path to the future, it's actually both a combination of working from home and going to work as well. And I was telling you earlier about how it helps to save the, or rather cut down on the costs, and save the money, almost a little bit of the money that you spend on all the costs when you have your own office, and when you're trying to save up, especially given the fact that we are in a pandemic. So we're trying to cut down costs as much as possible, because it's a pandemic, where the economy isn't as growing as it would in a normal instance. So obviously, because of all those things, we're trying to cut down on these costs, and we're trying to pay our workers, trying to give them their salaries, while also making sure that that your company can survive. Okay, so because of that, working from home actually helps offices cut down on costs. And another thing it does is it actually helps to save up office space. And what I mean when I say that is a lot of offices have a lot of, these cubicles for workers. You have your own desk, you have your own, little cubicle for you to do your work, right? But when you're not constantly, going to office, when you're working from home, it means that you can save up on that office space as well. It means that you don't necessarily have to have a big office, right? Because if you're only going to come to office for a certain thing, if you're only going to come to office for a brainstorming session, or if it's an important meeting, if it's something like that, then that means you don't necessarily need a huge office. You can have a quite moderate office that is, very aesthetic, very nice, and very pleasing to be at, and have a really good brainstorming session. So looking when you actually look at it, there is a lot of there's a lot of advantages for both people and the office. Like, there's an advantage for employees and employers as well, right? So whoever is in charge of the job and whoever is doing the job are both advantaged when it comes to working from home. And another thing that the pandemic actually proved was that we can work effectively with productivity while we're working from home. So if that's the case, then really, it's just a simple matter of, actually working from home, actually deciding to take that step and make sure that people work from home more often than they are current than how much they would normally work from home, given the fact that normally you don't work from home. It's just things had to change in during this pandemic. And if we're capable of performing so well, if we're capable of having high levels of productivity, if we're capable of doing so much while we're stuck in a pandemic, then chances are when it's normal it will be much better, and it will help all of us much better as well, right? So obviously that is something that companies will have to do if they are thinking of the future, if they're thinking of working from home in the future and having more time spent at home doing work at home in the future. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And also, like I said earlier, the future would be a combination of both. And another thing that would be there in the future when we're working from home is that it would require all these companies to actually make a lot of changes. And a lot of these changes, by changes I mean you actually just need to make sure that you invest in digital infrastructure, because if we're going to spend more time at home, then you might as well invest in those things and help try to make the situation better, help people work from home better. And it also means that you can change and it also means that it is required of you to change processes and policies to help people and to work the way around working from home. So that is what today was about: working from home, hustle culture, and how it is toxic, and whether 100% productivity actually exists. So I was super excited to be here, keep you company, and tell you about these things, because these are all concerns that we have. But it's time for me to head out of here. But don't worry, because there is a lot of things that that will be coming your way tomorrow, and the day after, because I'll be here. I'll be here to keep you company in the mornings. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But it was super exciting to be here, and I am so excited to have spoken to you about these topics. But it's time for me to head out of here. But don't be worried, because there's a lot more fun things coming your way on the rest of these shows. So make sure you stay tuned. But I'll catch you soon, and I hope you have a really good day.